Hello everyone, how's it going? This is the Bald Metal Nerd coming at you with a wonderful, wonderful video. This is one I've been really anticipating making. Obviously, this is going to be a review of the Yamaha A-S301. And you probably saw in the title that this is going to be a bit of a different perspective from Z Reviews, because he's the only review in-depth review I could really find of this amp on YouTube. And what I mean by the different perspective from what Z Reviews did is Z Reviews is a basically he's a quote what I would call a professional reviewer, and what I mean by that is he buys products specifically just to review them, and then he sends them on their way. Whereas me, I am definitely not. Every product I end up buying, I purchase for my own use. And you might be asking yourself, well, why the heck did you buy the Yamaha over the Onkyo if you watched the Z review of this? Well, the reason for that is, from what I could find on the internet, sources said the Yamaha is more reliable. So, whatever. Obviously, I'm going to go over the good, bad, and ugly with this amp in some pretty good detail. So, obviously, we have it in the box, so we're going to do a quick unboxing for you guys here. So let me just go ahead and cut into that top tape there. Cut into it. Come on now. There we go. Perfect. All right. Alright, got the box open up, so now I'll show off the contents for you. Looks like we have a book and everything. If that's worth looking at, I'll show it to you in a little more detail later. That's the first thing you see in there. Let's see what else we got. Batteries for the remote. The remote. Get out these foam pieces that break apart as I ever. Now we just got the amp itself, so let's. Oh, it's a heavy beast. Alright. Lift on it and chop the box out of the way. And here's how that big mamma jamma comes wrapped. Let's go ahead and unveil it. Down, and now we're going to take, this is my first time ever seeing this in person, obviously, so let's see what I think about this. Alright, well, my initial out of the box impression of this unit, pretty positive. The controls feel real nice, smooth, and precise. Really like that, the way those feel. Feels real good. Wow, that's quite a bit of range on the volume there. So, obviously I like the looks of this thing. I was looking at pictures of it online, obviously, before I got it, and videos and all that. And yeah, I have to say, I like the appearance, and now I know this can drive people nuts. The dials there for the controls, and I get that. I can see how that could upset somebody's OCD. But we'll see just how good those controls are and all that when we get to the actual sound of this thing. But I think we'll do a really, really fast tour of the front. We'll go left to right. Obviously, there's the power button. There's the IR sensor for the remote. Headphone jack. The awesome, sweet, sweet relays in there for turning the speakers on and off. Zoom in a tiny bit for you. Then we have, of course, tone controls. We got bass, treble, balance. That loudness feature that Zeos talked about that he wasn't a fan of. You got your input controls and volume, and that is pretty much it for the front. There's obviously the top. And don't worry, I'll give you guys, I'll take the cover off when I move into the other room, or before that, and we'll take a look inside. So I know how much people like to see the inside of electronics for some reason. And the side is going to be pretty plain, not much to look at there. Overall, my initial impression is this feels like a quality piece. The metal is nice and thick, and this is a good heavy unit. And the controls feel really good, so my initial impressions out of the box are pretty positive. So now we'll go ahead and we'll do the left to right thing on the back. We've got the Phono stage there, obviously. An input labeled CD. And this is for a moving magnet cartridge. Now we got some more inputs. We have one labeled tuner, and then one, and then just, I guess, line 1. And then we have line 2 and line 3 have recording loops in them, so you can hook up tape decks or mini disc recorders or CD recorders or whatever for analog recording, which is a really nice touch. Unfortunately, you can't use one of these to play the entire system through an equalizer. That won't work. So, like an external graphic equalizer. This only works, the line outs on these only really work for recording. So that's a slight bummer, but such is life. Then obviously we've got a digital inputs here. We got an optical and coax input. We have USB power there. Subwoofer out. The way that works is on a low pass filter of 100 Hertz. So I will be testing this thing with and without a sub. Your auto power standby, which basically turns the unit off after 8 hours in case you haven't touched it. I'm going to flip that to the off position because auto power off tends to annoy me when it happens. Like if I'm listening to my stereo all day long and it shuts off, that'll piss me off. So we'll just flip that to the off position. We get 2 sets of 5-way binding posts for speakers, obviously. This thing can run potentially 2 sets of speakers at once if you want, you know, or if you want to buy wire speakers, you can. I don't know if there's any audible benefit to that or not. I'm not even going to go there. Now we have our impedance selector, low and high. So it's set to high out of the box, but if you want, you can flip it to low. And you're only supposed to adjust this when it's unplugged, by the way, the impedance selector. I'm going to leave mine on high because that delivers more power. Now, I am going to test my speakers with the low and high impedance modes just to see if it makes any difference whatsoever. And all that's really left is the power cord, and that is basically it for the external tour of this thing. So I'll just put a pause on this real quick and we'll take a look inside the box. Or I'm sorry, inside the electronics. Alright guys, here we are with the cover off, and we're just going to take a quick look inside this amp, see what we got. Obviously, let's see, that's where the volume control is, that board there's attached to the volume control. So that's the volume control. Next one appears to be the input selector. tone controls. What's the next one? Oh, that's turn the speakers on and off. There's your headphone output and power switch. So there you go. Obviously here down the middle we have the main board. We have dual heat sinks, one for the left and right channel. I don't know, seems decent to me. Got all sorts of capacitors and circuits and all that. If you're an electronics expert, feel free to chime in. There's the power supply there. There's a board that does something. There are the digital inputs, and there's the board behind that. And there's all the analog inputs and all that. Oh, wow. So the Phono, I wonder if that entire board is dedicated to the Phono stage. I don't know. Because the Phono stage is right there, and that, whatever, and then I guess you have a board for everything else. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. If you're an electronics expert, great. Now you've seen inside this thing. Absolutely fascinating. So, obviously now I'm going to put it together and give you guys some initial sound impressions. That's the next step. See you in a bit. Alright guys, we've already had one kind of really surprising moment with the amp so far. Something I really didn't expect. And that is how good the headphone amp is compared to what I've been using for a couple of years now. I've been using an Audio Engine D1 for the past couple of years as my headphone amp. And when you put this in pure direct mode and listen through headphones, it stomps all over the Audio Engine D1's headphone output stage. Now, I am listening to the Audio Engine D1 on this amp because it's the only thing it's the only device I currently have plugged into the amp. I have the Audio Engine D1 connected via RCA cables into this, and wow, the the headphone amp on this is better than the Audio Engine. I literally did not expect that. What didn't surprise me about this is the fact that it's it can get much louder than the Audio Engine D1. So I'm going to go ahead and just demo here real quick, kind of as loud as the Audio Engine D1 gets for you on headphones. I'll be using these as the model. Another thing that Zeos doesn't like, which are the ATH M50Xs, but so let me go ahead and set this to 100. Okay. So let's crank that up. We got 100% volume. Want to make sure we're not bumping the camera there. Want to make sure I'm not over 100 on anything. I'm 100 in VLC media player and 100% in Windows. Okay, so we're at 100%, 100%, 100%. We're 100% everywhere across the board. So let's go ahead and we're going to listen to a little bit of Beethoven. And this is max volume. Keep in mind these are plugged into the Audio Engine D1 currently, so you'll see just how loud it is. Now, I could overdrive this, but of course that distorts the audio, so we're just going to do 100% everything. Alright, that gives you a relative idea of how loud that one gets, which is, it's respectable enough. I would say the Audio Engine D1 can get comfortably loud. It won't split your ear volume. It doesn't get ear-splittingly loud, but it'll definitely get comfortably loud. And let's go ahead and now let's plug these headphones into the Yamaha. And let's resume playing that song. And the volume isn't even to halfway on the Yamaha. So let's go ahead and turn that volume up. It's distorting now, these headphones. You can hear the distortion in the audio. I'm not all the way up to maximum. That's max volume for these headphones. And you can hear the audio distorting, so let's go ahead and dial that back to where it's not distorting. Roughly two-thirds, it goes up about 2/3 of the way before it just distorts the audio. But it gets significantly louder. I mean, there's no contest to which one gets louder. This one, by a mile. And I honestly expected it to get louder. But I was really surprised at just how clean the sound is with this thing, with Pure Direct. And by the way, if you're not using Pure Direct, all the tone controls do work with the headphone socket as well. I tested bass, treble, balance, loudness. All that works with the headphones just as much as it does the speakers. So something to keep in mind, and Pure Direct works. And with Pure Direct on, the sound that this headphone amp is capable of is top-notch in my opinion. So that's it. Now I'm going to hook up some speakers and we'll be talking about those. See you in a minute. Alright guys, now it's time to talk about sound levels on the high impedance setting. Right now I have this thing set to high impedance, and I'm going to demonstrate just how loud this thing gets. And not the volume right now is still, it's below halfway. I know it's not easy to see in the video because of the poor indicator, but it's right there basically. So we're still below halfway. So I'm going to go ahead and just play something for you. And normally I listen around 85 dB, so we'll get there. Right now, the graphic equalizer is set to flat, but if you want to see what this thing can do with some bass boost here on the subs, I'll go ahead and let you, or on my speaker here. First, let me go ahead and turn up the bass here. So obviously the target loudness for this was the high 80s, low 90s worth of dB, and we're not even halfway up the volume. So now granted, my speakers are fairly sensitive. They're JBL Northridge E90 speakers, which have they're 8-ohm speakers, and they have a sensitivity of 91 decibels, so they're fairly easy to drive. But obviously, you can see they are big floor standers, and they can definitely... Keep in mind, there's no subwoofer currently hooked up to this thing. So, yeah, this amp isn't even breaking a sweat. It's not even to halfway. Now, I am going to power off, and we are going to try this thing in low impedance mode and see... I'm going to leave the volume at that same setting and see what difference this makes with low impedance. So I'm going to flip that switch on the back and we'll be right back to test. Alright guys, I went ahead and I switched this over to low impedance, which obviously limits the voltage more on this device. So just for fun, you know, I figured I'd try low impedance, even though I don't plan on running the amp in that configuration typically, because you don't really want to limit your voltage. You want to get as much voltage as possible to your speakers. I'm just doing this to see if in what I would call the reasonable realm, if it actually makes any sort of an audible difference. So I already have the volume in the exact same place, and we're going to use the same source track, and we're going to see what we got here. Well, guys, that gets insanely loud even with the, again, I didn't change the volume position at all, and it has equal amount of loudness as it does on the high impedance setting. So, that's impressive. Very impressive. Obviously, this amp can drive efficient speakers really, really, really well, as I just proved. With either high or low impedance. So what I'm going to do now, guys, is I'm going to pause the and actually listen to some music that I know, not just this YouTube music library stuff. And I'm going to do some listening and some evaluation of actual music that I like. And then I'll come back with some more out-of-the-box impressions. But again, so far, this amp is very much impressing me because... now, granted, the only amps I've had before have been, you know, lowish end AV receivers. And to get this level of volume out of an AV receiver, I typically have to turn the volume up to between 75 and 85% of the way to get it there. Less than half on this receiver. So, obviously, this has a lot more power than your typical AV receiver. So, be back in a few, guys. Alright guys, here we are a couple of hours later, and, you know, basically, I've had a chance to do some listening with this amp. I listened to several different musical styles, and I did it at varying volumes. I did it at relatively high volumes, which was the, I would say, upper 80 to low 90 dB range, and then maybe mid to lower 70, and that doesn't sound like a giant difference, but since decibels are logarithmic, that is quite a difference in loudness level. So, what can I say about it? Well, the one word I would use to describe this amplifier sound is incredibly smooth. Everything sounded very smooth. It wasn't straining at all, and it sounded good at all volume levels. Some people say, well, this doesn't sound any good at lower volumes. Those people are incorrect. To me, this sounded absolutely great at a lower volume level. But I did find one thing interesting. I did play, as you can tell, I played around with the tone controls just a bit. I'll go ahead and just move that's the power cable you see there. Because I have it's permanent home, obviously. But anyway, I did adjust the bass and treble up slightly. And what I noticed is the tone controls have actually a pretty pleasant effect on the sound. They're better implemented than a lot of tone controls on a lot of other products I've had. What I mean by that is they don't distort the signal, typically, even when you boost the bass and treble. They're really smooth, and what I learned is that when you're listening at a what I would call high level, the tone controls add to the sound. It expands the sound stage, adds some nice effect to it, the whole 9 yards. Of course, Pure Direct is obviously more honest, but, you know, I do like what the tone controls on this do. Typically, I never mess with tone controls on a receiver, but these I actually like to play with, which is unusual. It honestly, in my opinion, it kind of eliminates the need for a proper graphic equalizer. These tone controls are really good. They transition frequencies very smoothly. But that's true more at louder volumes. But when you listen to lower volumes, I've noticed the Pure Direct tends to give you better sound than what you get with the tone control. So very interesting. And at high volumes, honestly, as far as what you prefer, Pure Direct or with the tone controls engaged, is going to be obviously personal preference, and at no point did my amplifier even somewhat break a sweat listening to a variety of tracks. It did everything pretty effortlessly, and like I said, I never even got the volume, you know, past halfway on this thing. So, yeah, so the next part of the video, I'm going to integrate a subwoofer. So it's going to take me a little time to research the best crossover frequency and all that, but we're getting to that next. So see you guys in a little bit. Alright guys, I went ahead and fiddled with the subwoofer settings quite a bit. And a lot of people complain about the sub out on this thing because it's just a 100 hertz low pass filter. But if you have anything above an absolute crap tier subwoofer, all you have to do to integrate it with this thing is just set the crossover frequency, you know, basically to whatever matches your speakers, and set the output volume on the subwoofer, and it matches. You can match it really well with this amp, as I learned. Basically, with my Northridge speakers, they extend down to 36 hertz, so I read up on it, and the recommended crossover frequency for those speakers is 50 hertz. I guess there's a little bit of interception there. So basically what I did is on the back of my sub, I set the crossover frequency with the built-in on the sub to 50 hertz. And I set the volume of the sub to basically blend in with the speakers. And I used Michael Jackson's Thriller to tune it. Because there's obviously a good bass line and a good amount of bass in that song. And I thought that would be a good one to tune it. And I think I did a pretty good job. And I'm going to go ahead and play you, not Thriller because of copyright, but this YouTube song that I've been playing that has a good amount of bass in it. And I'm going to play it with and without subwoofer and see if you guys know when I switch the subwoofer on and off. I think I did a pretty good job of integrating it. So I'm going to play, and then I'll make a change, and then listen a little more. So here we go. We're about to hit the pretty bassy part of this song. Bring that down a little bit. Alright, about to make the change. Now I'm about to change it back to what it was. Bumping the camera there, all around. Sorry about bumping the camera there, guys, but just in case you couldn't figure it out, we started off with the subwoofer attached, and then when I said I was making the change the first time, I unplugged the subwoofer, and I noticed a reduction of the quantity of bass. I hope it picked up over this crappy camera built into this phone and YouTube's compression and all that, but the middle part, no subwoofer, and then the third part, I plugged the subwoofer back in so you guys can kind of hear A, B, what it sounded like as best as I can. given my crappy limitations with recording audio, which is why I'm not big on audio demos with this thing. But I think a sub can integrate with this really well. So far, this amp has, it does everything that I want it to do, right? I have no real complaints about this amp whatsoever yet. Like I said, I even like the flip and tone controls, and that's not something I usually ever praise on any piece of audio equipment. So that's pretty cool. I will go ahead and show off something that Z Reviews showed off just real quick. I will run through. I'll just play with the tone control. So I'm going to turn off Pure Direct. That way you guys get a taste of kind of what this does, and I'll just keep using the same demo track that I've been using. Let me make sure I still have the subwoofer plugged in. Can we mess with the bass? Okay, great, it is. Alright, so that way you guys can really hear what this thing does. I'm not going to play it at a ridiculously loud volume, but loud enough to where you can hear extreme changes in the sound that this is going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and just play this track again. Yeah, turn it up a little bit, I guess, to where it's comfortable. Skip ahead to the more. And right now I'm just going to hit the bass all the way up, which is ridiculous. And the treble. Don't ever do that, by the way. It really throws off that obviously really throws off the balance of the music, but as you can see, even at full tilt, it didn't distort the sound, which is pretty impressive. That's why I like these tone controls so much. They don't seem to really distort the signal at all. They just change the tone, which is great. Now I'll show you the loudness feature on this thing that Z Review hates. So it's just a bizarre. I'm not a big fan of that loudness feature either, so I'd say I agree with him 100% on that. And then I'll show you the advanced muting function of this thing. So I'm going to hit mute, and you'll see the volume knob turn some. And it just attenuates the signal. It doesn't turn it off. You do that, and it turns back. Oh yeah, we got a motorized knob, which is nice. That's pretty cool. I like motorized things. That's pretty cool. Oh, and by the way, as far as the material of the knob, the front is like brushed aluminum on a plastic knob, in case you care. Same is true on the input selector, and you've got little bright bits here in the tone controls. So there you go. So far, this thing is a total winner, in my opinion. The sound that this does for music is absolutely smooth. I mean, that's just all I can describe this as. Smooth. Everything about this amplifier is just silky smooth with the sound, which is great. In case you're wondering, it's a Class AB amplifier. I know someone will probably ask that in the comments, but yes, this is a Class AB, not a Class D. And pretty much all AV amps, except for the more expensive ones, are going to be Class D. So if you care about amplifier classes, yes, this is Class AB, which is, quote, a good thing, I guess. But yeah, everything silky smooth so far. So what's next, obviously, is I'm going to listen to some different types of content that isn't music. Excuse me. I'm going to listen to some, I'll probably watch a movie or two, and play some video games, and I'll give my impressions of different types of content with the sound of this. So that's next. See you guys in a bit. Okay, guys, here we are at the tail end of my first weekend with this amplifier. In case I didn't mention in the earlier part of this video, I got this amplifier on a Friday evening when I got home from work. It was waiting for me, shipped from Amazon. And here we are, Sunday night, the tail end of the weekend, and so obviously I had a lot of time to spend over the weekend with this amplifier. So that's how I formed all my opinions and all that. So anyway, just to throw a few notes back on the first part of this video, I know I did a sub demo, and I know it sounded distorted because I've already listened to it. The reason it sounded so distorted in the video, I think, is due to the limitations of my smartphone's camera. I'm sorry, microphone. Obviously, the microphone in my smartphone is not going to be very good. So it sounded rather distorted and boomy, the bass. In real life, it does not sound like that at all. In fact, the bass is a very smooth response. And when you properly integrate it with the amp, a sub really does, you know, give you more of that deep bass that you get with just speakers alone. So I would definitely recommend just using the subwoofer output and the sub's internal crossover to set it to whatever in the proper level and all that. You can integrate a sub really well with this. So anyway, I had a chance to listen to a variety of program material. I listened to a ton of music, obviously. I watched a few movies and I played some video games. Everything sounded amazing. What really struck me the most about the music reproduction is there were times when I was laying back and listening. The soundstage that this produced was absolutely amazing. You know, it sounded like the instruments were all around the room with me. I mean, the stereo imaging on this thing was just beautiful, and the sound was so smooth, just smooth. I know I've said this a million times in this review already, but that's what this amp is. It's smooth, baby. So anyway, I also had a chance to test out the built-in Phono stage on this thing. And the built-in Phono stage was significantly better than the one that's built into the Audio-Technica AT-LP120, because previously I had only ever used the line level output on my LP120, because before I only had a receiver that did not have a Phono stage. But this, switching it to Phono mode and hooking it up to the Phono input on this, instantly made the sound a lot better. It was much less grainy, less surface noise, the whole 9 yards. So basically, everything that I was able to A-B in between what I previously used and this was a huge upgrade. And I mentioned earlier in the review that the headphone amp or output was a big upgrade from my Audio Engine D1. And that is absolutely the case. I was able to A-B that obviously pretty easily. Now, was I able to A-B this with what I was previously using? What I was previously using was this unit here, a Pioneer VSX 521. Okay, and it's a decent entry-level AV receiver. Okay, what's funny about it though is it supposedly has more power than the Yamaha. They rated it at 80 watts per channel instead of 60 watts, which, yeah, I don't think so. I just don't think that's true at all. And they're rating it at 125 for at 6 ohms. I just don't see that as being a thing with this. The amp weighs much less than the Yamaha. It's less expensive. The power supply is smaller. There's no way that this is putting out the same amount of power as this. It's just not physically possible due to the laws of physics, right? But AV receivers get away with those sorts of power ratings because of the way they measure the power output versus the way it's done with these amps. So basically you get what I would call 60 very honest watts of power with the Yamaha. And no, I could not A-B it between the Pioneer and the Yamaha. But from what I could tell you, when I was listening to the Pioneer, I did not feel glued to my seat all weekend long listening with my jaw dropping and hitting the floor because it sounded so good. That never happened with the Pioneer. Yes, I would listen to music and I would be engaged with it and it would sound good. Good enough. But this took it to a level that the Pioneer never even remotely approached. It wasn't even close. Absolutely, quote, magical with this amp. I know I'm using non-scientific terms and all that, but trust me, this sounded much better than the Pioneer. And why, might you ask? Because in theory, all solid-state amplifiers should, quote, sound the same, assuming they're, you know, in their normal thresholds, not driven to clipping, all that. And honestly, I'm generally a believer of that. But what I think, honestly, for my two-channel, my floor-standing speakers, I don't think this Pioneer was driving them nearly as well as this Yamaha does. I think this Yamaha, because it is an actually more powerful amplifier than the Pioneer, I think it just does a much better job of driving those speakers. Because like I said, to get to the decibel levels that I like to listen at, on the Pioneer, I would have to push it to 75, sometimes 85% of its max volume, okay? On the Yamaha, I don't even get to halfway before I tap out and I'm like, okay, I can't take any more volume. So that tells me, even though it's, quote, less watts, there's a lot more power going to my speakers driving them than there is with the Pioneer. And maybe because the Pioneer doesn't have nearly as much headroom as the Yamaha does when driving the same loads, that's maybe why the Yamaha sounds better. I don't know. I can't really explain it. Maybe the circuitry in the Yamaha is better. I really don't know why it sounds better. It just does. And honestly, I think this is a great amplifier for what I would consider normal people. And what I mean by normal people are folks who have relatively affordable, relatively easy to drive speakers. If you have those, this is a great option for you. But if you have esoteric, high-end, extremely expensive speakers that cost tens of thousands of dollars, you're probably not watching this review. But anyway, if you do, this is probably a bad choice. If you want, you know, surround sound or video switching, this is a bad choice. But if you just want pure two-channel, analog type of deal, well, except for the DAC on board, but most basically analog, this is the amp, I would say, for you. It is absolutely fantastic, smooth as hell. Even the tone controls are great. Now that I've heaped enough praise on this thing, I will talk about the few things I don't like about this amp. And there are a few, but they are most definitely what I would consider nitpicks and not remotely deal breakers. One thing I will agree with Zeos on, the lack of an LED in the volume indicator is really annoying. It kind of pisses me off, actually, because I'm like, you know, trying to figure out where the volume's set. And yeah, from across the room, there's no way you can tell where that little dinky level is set at. That's ridiculous. I mean, they have an LED there. Why couldn't they put an LED there? That would have, hell, there's an LED there for pure direct and power. It would have been nothing for them to put an LED in there, and I agree with Zeos that that is stupid as hell. Also, the loudness feature. I don't care for it either. I tried it out and thought it was dumb, and I will probably never use it. But so what? It's, you know, it's not a deal breaker because it's optional. You don't have to use it, but and it would have been nice, I guess, if they had utilized that space there. I would have even been willing to pay slightly more for the unit if they had put, you know, VU meters there or something. But I know they save that for their ultra expensive amps. But, you know, something like VU meters there or a screen telling you what your volume, something, you know, that would have been kind of nice. But again, the minor nitpicks, very minor nitpicks. These are not things that would say, hey, you know, whatever. I'm totally fine with it the way that it is, and the reason I would recommend this over an AV receiver is the primary reason to get an integrated amp is you want to buy something where you know every single penny was spent on basically a minimal set of features and sound quality. That is all. There was no, they didn't have to license Dolby anything. They didn't have to put HDMI in. They didn't have to do video switching. They didn't have to do room processing. They didn't have to do any of this stuff, excuse me, that AV receivers have to do. They did none of that. all of the engineering budget went into sound for this thing, and it really, really, really shows. Needless to say, I can unequivocally give this a giant recommendation, thumbs up to get this thing. So that's it. If you have this, let me know in the comments below. If you agree, disagree, whatever. If you got the Onkyo instead of this, let me know. Anything, doesn't matter. Anyway, that pretty much wraps this up. As always, if you like this, thumbs up. If you hate me, thumbs down. Share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thanks so much for watching. Live long and prosper.